Welcome to this episode of Amber, the one and only bilingual cultural show on BUTV10. I'm Rosie Gu.
And I'm 施阳毅，欢迎大家收看本期的情色琥珀，我是主播易施阳，
我是古若曦。Here's what we have for you today. Amber took a look at the 2022 Winter Olympics hosted in Beijing, China, and the presence of Asian American athletes. Regarding the controversy between Asian American athletes' identity and the countries they're representing, we conducted a street interview, an interview with an international relations professor, and student athletes to collect diverse opinions within the BU community. Meanwhile, China has suspended a large number of flights in between the US and China to prevent the cross-border spread of COVID-19. We spoke to a flight information blogger, an English professor, and international students to get their perspectives on this ongoing issue. In the end, there have been many concerns regarding the BU isolation housing policies during the peak of Omicron variant. We invited an infectious disease specialist from BU School of Medicine to explain the rationales behind BU's isolation policies. We also invited two students to discuss their isolation experiences at BU.
在本期的情色琥珀中，我们就北京冬奥会中亚裔美国运动员的身份和他们所代表的国家之间的争议进行了讨论。我们在 BU 校园内进行了街头采访，并邀请了教授和大学体育生来分享他们对此的看法。与此同时，为防止境外新冠的输入，中国禁飞了大批往返美国的航班。我们联系了微博航空信息博主、教授和受到影响的波士顿大学国际学生，来讨论他们在此事件中的态度。节目的最后，在波士顿大学感染过新冠病毒的学生与我们分享了在校隔离的感受。同时，我们也邀请了波士顿大学医学院传染病学专家解释隔离政策的有效性。
With the opening of Winter Olympics, Asian American athletes who are competing for the Chinese team are under the spotlight. Amber takes a look at their role and significance in the Chinese team and particular experiences they get.
As the Beijing Winter Olympics ended, many Asian American athletes have been thrown into public discussions, especially those who decided to give up their U.S. citizenship and fight for their home country. Luisa Gondek and Jordan Cocoludo, two BU freshman students, say fighting for any country is athletes' own decision.
Yeah, I think it's just kind of a tricky situation in terms of not only citizenship but also just identity in general, and I feel like it's just a question of where she felt most comfortable competing, I guess.
Yeah, and that's also a thing where it's other people will chime in, but it's that's kind of her decision in and of herself, but also other people are going to have their own opinions about it, which also makes it harder for her to make whatever decision she wants.
Athletes who choose to compete for their own countries are not uncommon. But some Chinese American athletes face harsher critiques might because of the rising tension between the two countries. BU Professor Zheng Grasso explains to us.
There are many European athletes who've done that. For example, for years, Italy and Greece have allowed Italian Americans and Greek Americans, who are obviously American citizens born in the United States, to compete on teams in the Olympics for their ancestors or the grandparents or the great-grandparents' countries. But what is more controversial about Eileen's choice is China, which has had not the best relations with the United States relatively recently, but certainly not poor, much better now than it has been in the past. What I think has happened with Eileen Gu is that she found herself in a political storm because of the relationship the United States has with China today, and in getting China more medals than the United States was seen as a problematic situation, and in a different time period, it would have been a different group that would have been upset. Say, for example, if this was happening during the 1930s in Germany, German Americans who went to Germany would be similarly criticized, although that was a much more serious conflict that would result from that. But that's what I think. I think that if she was Japanese American, it wouldn't have resulted in such a storm of controversy.
Complicated relationships among countries seem to make politics ingrained everywhere, including this international sports event. When we enjoy athletes demonstrating their talents, do we care about where they come from? Students from BU have their ideas.
I think people should focus more on the competition itself. I think people should just, while you're watching TV shows, watching the Winter Olympics, you just have to enjoy the game, and then I think that's it. If you really do like the sports, then just enjoy the game, no matter that athlete is fighting for which country. It really doesn't matter.
Although many people understand those athletes' choice, some U.S. news organizations portray them as traitors. David Benazara, a BU sophomore student, expresses his opinion on the skier, Eileen Gu.
I can understand why people would call them the traitors. I wouldn't say they're traitors because she is Chinese, and she's competing for her native country. Yes, she was born in the U.S., but that's where she's originally from. So I wouldn't call her a traitor at all. But I can understand why certain people would feel that way, because she was born in the U.S. and she grew up in the U.S. with all the benefits of being a U.S. citizen.
Through the eyes of athletes, representing their countries may have more meanings. Two BU student athletes share their opinions on making this decision.
Well, winning's everything. And I think being a good winner is being a good loser too, kind of taking it and not like dwelling on it, but learning from it. And like in this case, like giving up your citizenship, like that's a huge sacrifice, and like all athletes have to make sacrifices, and some a lot greater than others. But that's a sacrifice that she's given up to win, and to kind of maybe just to prove people wrong,
Yeah, I think a lot of times when you make like big decisions like these, it's not to kind of like please other people, but it's just the best decision for you and your family and like the people that you feel closest to. So it's unfortunate that some of the followers that were watching her are kind of ashamed of how she did, but I'm sure that at the end of the day, like the decision for her was deeper than just like getting perceived as a good athlete by China.
For Amber, I'm Dorothy Du.
Although people hold different ideas on Asian American athletes' identities and their choices, it is more important that we all enjoy sports through this Winter Olympics.
Rosie, are you planning to go back to China this summer?
Oh, I'm not sure. It's basically impossible to get a flight ticket at the moment.
Same here, but I do miss my family.
Yeah, it really depends on whether if the flight policies between China and the US will change or not later.
Due to the increased number of COVID-19 cases since the outbreak of Omicron, China canceled many international flights, including the ones between the US and China. In response to this, the U.S. Department of Transportation suspended 44 flights to China, which originally scheduled from January to March. Reporter Tian Liao brings you more.
As the U.S. government announced the suspension of 44 flights by Chinese carriers from January 30 to March 29, after China canceled some American flights over COVID-19 concerns. Chinese international students at Boston University are not sure whether a summer trip home will be available.
Probably not, because so for the flight cancellation, there are a lot of flights being canceled.
I mean, I don't know, it's hard to tell, but there are a lot of friends of mine are trying to go back home at the same time period.
Students plan to take courses and travel if they have to stay in the U.S. over the summer.
I plan to attend some summer schools in Boston University, and I also go traveling in America.
I mean, my plan for staying here, I would probably just take a summer session, but if I couldn't, I would probably just go find an intern.
Peel the Air Ticket North America, who constantly updates information about flight availability and travel guidelines on Weibo, suggested a way to secure a flight and the risks of using it. For privacy reasons, he asked to remain off camera.
They buy as many tickets as possible. The best way is that they have just one ticket, can fly, and the rest of tickets can be refunded in a matter of times. But if they have more than one ticket that can fly, then they would need to face the cancellation charge or the not so friendly airline credit. So since a lot of tickets is non-refundable.
Kelly also said those who have to leave the US to avoid legal issues could spend a lot of money for a ticket.
Students finish their schools graduating this year or stay here for their OPT or their immigration status comes to the end, they must go home. Hopefully one of them can fly and they spend a lot of money on that.
Peter Ruggiero, lecturer at the College of Arts and Sciences writing program, said flight cancellations might discourage students from China to study in the US.
It can mean not studying in the United States, and it can mean somebody might choose to go to another country if it's possible. Australia, New Zealand.
Students and Professor Ruggiero said BU should provide housing for students whose flights will be canceled.
Maybe provide some housing because from the end of the semester to the start of the summer school in Boston University, maybe I'll need to live in the hotels. So if Boston University can provide housing to us, it will be much more convenient.
Someone's flight was canceled right before the person aboard or whatever, so the person must be very concerned. So if BU could make a phone call, say that come back, we'll arrange everything for you, or we can help you back to Boston.
It's helping them, if they can't leave in the summer or something like that, help them find places around the Boston area, perhaps, I don't know, I would go so far as to subsidize rent for students because it's expensive, but that's me. I can only see the president of the university.
For Amber, I'm Tian Liao.
Let's hope to see some positive changes on this flight suspension policy so that the Chinese international students in the US could go back to their hometowns.
Since the start of spring 2022, BU has seen a peak in COVID positive test rate on campus due to the new Omicron variant. As many concerns about BU isolation housing policies arise, Amber invited an infectious disease specialist and BU community to share their perspectives.
As the spring semester started in 2022, there has been a spike in COVID cases on BU campus due to the spread of the new Omicron variant. Amber invited students and a professor to share their views on isolation housing and new COVID policy. BU's policy changed to having a roommate in isolation due to the lack of isolation housing on campus. Students share their experiences in isolation this semester.
I think having a roommate isn't necessarily the best option to mitigate the COVID situation, since there's a chance of cross-contamination and everything. If, say, one of the roommate has worse symptoms, which last longer, maybe that can be passed on to the other guy. Yeah, I think that might be slightly dangerous.
One thing I see not really good is we have some roommate, because we have the risk if we are recovered, but we are then be reinfected by our roommate.
Professor Carlos Acuna Villarduña from BU School of Medicine addressed the concerns from students and explained the rationale behind this new isolation policy.
Since December 15, that's when we started seeing the Omicron surge. Pretty much all the cases of COVID in the state of Massachusetts have been related to Omicron. So if two people have Omicron in January or have COVID in January or February, very likely, almost certain that they will have the Omicron variant. So they can certainly be cohorted safely. There is no risk that, if a person has COVID already, that it may pass the same variant to the other person who already had the same variant.
Students discussed their thoughts on BU's new COVID policies, such as unobserved COVID testing and the removal of green badge.
It is very, very possible for people to handing fake samples, which actually might be a worse case. Especially for instance, I personally would know people that would do so because of, say, they want to attend certain very important events and stuff. So therefore, chances are that they will escape from this testing.
Green badge is really necessary for us. If there's no green badge anymore and we need them to take on the mask, I feel it's really unreasonable and I don't dare to go to dining hall anymore.
Professor Carlos explained that changes in COVID policies are reasonable at the current state of pandemic.
Right now, we are in a position in the state of Massachusetts with receiving a relatively low number of cases. Now, in this context, it makes sense to review certain policies that we use during the search time. I have to emphasize that Boston University have a group of experts in infectious diseases managing these policies. So in my opinion, and I am not part of the group who developed these policies, the decrease in the frequency of testing.
Lastly, Professor Carlos expressed his optimistic view of living with COVID-19 in the future.
I think that right now we are in a better position, in a much better position than we were in 2021 or even 2020. So even if the virus returns, we will certainly be prepared. We have widely testing available right now. We have access to medications right now. There are therapeutics available, and there are oral medications are available right now for high-risk population, and that's going to be something very, very important. So I think that there is reason to be cautiously optimistic at this point.
For Amber, I'm Wenyan Zhang.
We'd love to see a lower positive test rate in the BU community. It's still crucial for us to keep social distancing and wear face masks to reduce virus transmission. That wraps up this episode of Amber. If you want to know more about story behind the things, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, WeChat, and Weibo, and tell us more about your opinions.
If you want to catch up on past episodes, please visit butv10.com/amber.
今天的情色琥珀就到这里了。
Thank you for stopping by. We'll see you next time.
感谢您收看本期节目，我们
下
期
再
见。
An international, an English professor.
开始前整理一下表情。
不要。
沉淀一下，这就可以开始。Rosie 语速有点越来越快，越来越快了，太紧张了。Rap star。
我们联系了微博致命，致命为 Summer。不要让我等会儿停不下来了。